There we go.
Right.
Let's see here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome. We're going to give it a couple more minutes for people to come in. Hey, Mark, can you hear us?
I hear you.
Awesome. I'm going to let you monitor the chat because Robert's actually he's on his cell phone right now. Okay, we're going to give it a few minutes. We got one more minute before we get started. Okay.
Sounds good.
Let's see here.
Right.
What's that?
I know this ain't the meet.
Yeah, I lost you, Robert.
I'm gonna have you.
All
I'm
right.
gonna have you do the introductions.
Gotcha. All right.
That I just missed. Cool. Carry on.
All right. Let's see here. All right, we've got Representative Cacarney here as well. Representative Cacarney, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you. I like your
Good
hair.
morning.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. So real quick, before we get any further, my name is Patrick Dunnigan. I'm the director and creator of Kentucky Cannabis Freedom Coalition. I've got Robert Matheny on the other line. He is one of our board directors. He is having some audio issues, so bear with us while we try to get through that. For the first 15 minutes, we're going to play an audio clip and let you listen to an interview that we want you all to pay attention to. And then we're going to go into some slides. This is being Facebook Live. So if you have any questions, please join us. Go to our website, legalizekentucky.com, right? Click on Town Hall Meeting and join the meeting so you can ask questions at the end. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and get into this. Representative Cacarney, if you want to get a cup of coffee, you relax for 15 minutes, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Let's see here. All right.
All right, everyone, welcome back for another
Can you hear
deep
that,
dive.
Robert?
Today, we're going to be heading down south to Kentucky to take a look at something pretty interesting going on down there.
Yeah,
Cannabis reform.
absolutely. And we've got a whole lot to cover too. We've been looking through some legislative documents, getting intel from advocacy groups.
Oh, very cool.
And we've even got some data analysis to really get into the nitty gritty of what's going on and why folks should be paying attention.
Okay, so let's dive right into this, shall we? And listeners, you are in for a treat because Kentucky is potentially on the verge of something big, right? Like, we're not just talking about tweaking some minor laws here.
No, not at all. This is something much bigger, potentially even a constitutional amendment.
Whoa, really? A constitutional amendment?
Yeah, it's called HB 105,
Okay.
and it could actually let the people of Kentucky directly vote on cannabis decriminalization.
Okay, hold on. You're going to have to break this down for me because it's a pretty major development, a constitutional amendment.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So this HB 105, what it does is it guarantees adults 21 and older the right to possess, use, buy, or sell up to 1 ounce of cannabis.
Okay.
And they could even cultivate up to 5 plants for personal use,
Oh,
all without any criminal penalties.
so it's not just about legalization, it's about putting the power in the hands of Kentuckians to actually make this decision themselves.
Exactly.
I can see why you're so excited about this. It seems like a pretty big deal. But why go the route of a constitutional amendment? I mean, wouldn't just passing a regular law be enough?
Well, think about it this way. If they change the state constitution,
Yeah.
it's a much more permanent change, you know? Future legislatures can't just come in and easily reverse it.
Oh, okay.
It's a way to really solidify this change and protect it for the people who support decriminalization.
Right, because it's literally written into the fabric of the state's laws.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So we've got this bill, HB 105, potentially changing the game in Kentucky.
Mhm.
But there's also a group that's been super vocal about pushing for this change.
Yeah, the Kentucky Cannabis Freedom Coalition.
The KCFC, I've heard of these guys. They've been making some noise.
Oh, yeah, they're doing some amazing work.
So what exactly is their role in all of this?
Well, they're a nonprofit advocacy group,
Okay.
and they're working totally within the legal system to educate the public about cannabis.
All right.
You know, dispelling those myths and advocating for common sense reforms like HB 105.
So they're not just about shouting from the rooftops. They're actually getting down to the nuts and bolts of making this happen.
Exactly. And they're really smart about it too. They have this initiative called Survey Says,
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
where they gauge public opinion, you know,
Very clear.
to show that there's widespread support for change.
Sorry.
It's all about fostering open dialogue and really getting people talking about this issue.
I love that. All right, so we've got this potential game changer in HB 105. We've got the KCFC working hard to make it a reality, and it sounds like there's a lot of public support brewing. So let's say someone listening to this is totally fired up about this issue. Right. What can they actually do to help push HB 105 across the finish line?
Well, this is where things get really interesting because now it's all about the people.
Ooh, I like where this is going. This is about getting involved,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Since we're talking about a constitutional amendment, the legislature has to take action, right?
Right.
So the most impactful thing anyone can do is contact their representatives,
Okay.
especially their Republican representatives, and urge them to support and co-sponsor HB 105.
All right, so it's time for all you Kentuckians out there to pick up those phones and make your voices heard. We're talking about calling the legislative hotline,
Yes,
and that number is 1-800-372-7181.
get those calls going.
Don't be shy. Don't just call once.
No,
Make it twice a day,
exactly.
Monday through Friday,
Yeah.
between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time.
Every call makes a difference.
I love it. So this is about showing the Kentucky legislature just how much support there is for HB 105.
Absolutely. They need to see how important this is to the people they represent.
Right, because every call is a message. It's a statement.
Exactly.
And this is your chance, Kentucky, to directly impact the future of cannabis in your state.
It's all about taking action.
So let's say someone is ready to make that call.
Yeah.
But they're thinking, hold on, how do I actually find my representative?
Okay, good question. It's super easy.
Okay.
For example, let's say your representative is Jared Bauman.
Okay.
You can email him directly at jared.bauman@kilegislature.gov.
All right, super simple. Or if you're not sure who your representative is,
Right.
you can always call the Legislative Research Commission,
They're great.
or the LRC for short, at 502-564-810.
They'll hook you up with your representative's info in no time.
It's all about taking that first step, making that connection.
And remember,
Yeah,
don't underestimate the power of actually talking to your elected officials.
I love that. So we've laid out the roadmap. We've given you the tools.
Yep.
It's time for action, Kentucky. Let's make this happen.
I'm excited to see what happens next.
Me too. So we've
Mhm.
talked a lot about taking action and how important it is to reach out to your representatives. But let's take a step back for a second and look at what's actually happening on the ground in Kentucky.
Right? Like, what does the current cannabis landscape look like?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the data actually paints a pretty stark picture. The Kentucky Center for Economic Policy released a report, and it shows thousands of Kentuckians are facing cannabis related charges and convictions every year.
Wow, thousands. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. And you know what's really crazy? A lot of these are for minor offenses.
Like what? Just civil possession or something.
Exactly. Like, for example, Lyon County has a conviction rate of 11.9 per 1,000 residents.
Well, hold on. That sounds really high.
It is. That's more than 4 times the state average.
Wow, that's some pretty staggering numbers. It really makes you think about the human cost of all of this, you know?
Absolutely. Every charge, every conviction, it represents a real person whose life is being affected.
Right. It's not just a statistic, it's someone's job prospects, their housing, their right to vote, even.
Exactly. It's a ripple effect that goes way beyond just a possession charge.
So, with HB 105 on the table, the one we were talking about earlier, the one that could decriminalize cannabis, do you think we could actually see a shift in those numbers? Like, could we see fewer charges and convictions?
Oh, I definitely think it's possible. Decriminalization could really take a lot of pressure off the justice system.
Right. So they could focus on more serious crimes.
Exactly. And think about it, decriminalization could actually lead to new industries,
Oh, yeah.
new jobs, more tax revenue. It could be a real boost to the Kentucky economy.
It's like a domino effect. All these positive impacts stemming from one change.
And it's not just economic benefits either. We could see positive social impacts as well. Well, think about it. Decriminalization could really help change public perception about cannabis,
Hmm.
help break down those negative stereotypes.
Yeah.
And that could lead to more community development, more understanding, and acceptance.
I like it. So it's not just about individual freedom. It's about the entire state of Kentucky potentially benefiting from this.
Exactly. It's about creating a more just and equitable society.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about Kentucky, but this isn't just happening in a vacuum, right? There's a whole national movement going on.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're seeing a massive shift all across the country when it comes to cannabis.
It's like a domino effect. More and more states are joining the party.
Exactly. More states are legalizing or decriminalizing, and it's really putting pressure on others to reevaluate their own policies.
It's like, hey, if they can do it, why can't we?
Exactly. And that national momentum is putting Kentucky in a really interesting position.
Look at a crossroads.
Totally. They have HB 105 on the table. They've got the KCFC pushing for change. And now they've got all these other states showing them that it's possible.
So it's like a pivotal moment for Kentucky.
Yeah.
Where do they want to stand on this issue?
Exactly. Do they want to be part of this new wave of reform, or do they want to stay stuck in the past?
And that's why it's so important for people to contact their legislator.
Yes. They need to make their voices heard.
It's not just about saying yes or no to cannabis. It's about making sure these complex issues are being discussed.
Right. And that all sides are being heard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the KCFC and their role in advocating for HB 105, but they're also doing a lot of educational work, right?
Oh, absolutely. Their website is like a one-stop shop for all things cannabis.
Really?
They've got info on HB 105. They've got the latest research and news.
Wow.
They even have a Know Your Rights section, which is super helpful for anyone who's curious about cannabis in Kentucky.
It's like they're providing people with the tools they need to make informed decisions.
Exactly. And their whole data-driven approach is really effective.
Yeah. Like what the Survey Says initiative, they're showing that support for reform isn't just a bunch of people shouting. It's actually a widespread sentiment.
It's smart and it gives them a lot of credibility.
It's like they're speaking the language of facts and figures.
Exactly. And that's what policymakers need to see.
It's inspiring to see a group like that so dedicated to making a difference.
They're really putting in the work.
So we've been talking a lot about calling that legislative hotline,
Yeah, it's super important.
but are there other ways people can get involved with the KCFC and their efforts?
Oh, yeah, tons. Their website has a how to help section, and it's got all sorts of ways to contribute.
Awesome.
You can donate, you can sign up for their newsletter, you can even attend their events and connect with other people who are passionate about this issue.
So it's about finding what works for you, what you're comfortable with.
Exactly. And remember, every little bit helps.
It's all about collective action, right?
Absolutely. And change doesn't happen overnight, you know.
It's process.
The legislative process can be slow, it can be frustrating sometimes, but it's important to stay persistent
Keep those goals coming.
and stay informed. Keep up with what's happening with HB 105 and don't be afraid to speak your mind.
I love it. Okay, so before we move on, is there anything else about HB 105 itself that we haven't covered yet? Any interesting tidbits?
Oh, actually, there's another bill that's kind of connected to all of this. It's called HB 106.
Oh, really? What's that one about?
We don't have all the details yet, but it seems like it's addressing some of the potential consequences of decriminalization.
Like what?
Well, things like expunging past cannabis convictions
Oh, wow, that would be huge.
and protecting Second Amendment rights.
Okay, so it's like they're trying to anticipate some of the challenges that might come up
Exactly. It's about being proactive and thinking about the bigger picture.
and expunging past convictions. That would be a game changer for so many people.
It would give people a clean slate, a chance to move forward without the stigma of a criminal record.
Exactly. And the Second Amendment part, that's an interesting one because federal law still prohibits cannabis users from owning firearms.
Right, even in states where it's legal.
So it's like a clash between state and federal law.
It's a complex issue, and it's something that's going to need to be addressed as more states move towards cannabis reform.
It's like a whole other can of worms, but an important one to discuss.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. HB 105, the KCFC, the potential impacts of decriminalization.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
What are some key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Well, first and foremost, this issue is about way more than just cannabis.
Right. It's about so much more.
It's about individual freedoms, economic opportunities, social justice.
And it's about the role of government in our lives.
Exactly. And for Kentuckians, this is something that directly affects them.
The future of cannabis in their state is, in many ways, in their hands.
Exactly. So whether you're passionate about this issue or just starting to learn about it, your voice matters.
Get involved. Contact your legislators, especially your Republican representatives, and make your voice heard.
Every phone call, every email, it all adds up.
It's about showing them how much this issue matters to you.
And it's not just about voicing your opinion, it's about staying informed
Right. Keep learning. Keep asking questions.
and have those conversations with your elected officials and your community members.
It's a conversation that deserves everyone's attention.
Absolutely. And we've given you the information and the tools to get involved. So we encourage you to keep researching and forming your own opinion.
Exactly. This is about empowering yourselves to make informed decisions. All right. So as we wrap up our deep dive into what's going on with cannabis in Kentucky, I'm really curious what has stood out to you the most from everything we've talked about.
Yeah, it's been a lot to unpack for sure.
It really has.
For me, what's really striking is how we're seeing all these different things coming together at once in Kentucky. Like you've got this shift in public opinion happening,
Yeah.
and you've got this super dedicated advocacy group, the KCFC, really pushing for change.
They're awesome.
They really are. And then on top of that, you've got this real potential for economic and social benefits for the entire state.
It's like all the stars are aligning.
Yeah, it really feels like Kentucky's at a turning point.
It's exciting. And, while we've been focusing a lot on the potential positive impacts of HB 105, we should also acknowledge that this is a complicated issue with valid concerns on all sides.
Oh, absolutely. You've got to consider things like public health, road safety, youth access, and how all of this would be regulated.
Right. It's not just a simple yes or no kind of thing.
It's about having those tough conversations, weighing the pros and cons, and figuring out what kind of future Kentuckians want for their state.
Exactly. And that's why citizen engagement is so important.
Absolutely. It's not just about calling your legislators, it's about talking to your neighbors, your friends, your family,
Right. Having those open and honest conversations about what this all means.
and working together to create policies that actually reflect the values and needs of Kentucky residents.
Okay. So for anyone who might have missed a few things along the way, let's do a super quick recap here. We're talking about HB 105, a bill that could potentially allow Kentuckians to vote on decriminalizing cannabis.
And remember, the most effective way to make your voice heard on this issue is to contact your Republican legislators and tell them to support and co-sponsor HB 105.
That's right. Call that legislative hotline at 1-800-372-7181.
Make those calls.
Twice a day, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Every call makes a difference.
And don't forget, you can also find your representative's contact information online through the Legislative Research Commission if you need it.
Super easy. So if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture here,
Yeah.
Kentucky has a real chance to be a leader in this whole movement for cannabis reform that's sweeping the nation.
That's an exciting time.
It really is. And for all of you listening in Kentucky right now, the future of this issue is really in your hands.
Make your voices heard.
That's right. Speak up, get involved, and help shape the future of your state.
And as you continue to learn about this issue, I'll leave you with one final thought. If Kentucky does decide to decriminalize cannabis, what kind of impact do you think that will have on the state?
What kind of economic and social changes might we see?
How will this decision affect different communities across Kentucky?
It's definitely something to think about.
It's a complex issue with a lot of different angles, and it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We've given you the information, the resources, and hopefully the inspiration to get involved.
Now it's your turn. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the issues that matter most to you.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
All right. Let's see, everybody still there? Everybody still with me?
I got you.
All right, cool. Robert, you want to introduce yourself real quick while I get this ready?
Hello, everybody. My name's Robert Matheny. I own Kentucky CBD Pharmacy. I'm a board director for Kentucky Cannabis Freedom Coalition, as well as a board director for the Kentucky Hemp Association. I like to be the sticky icky that binds it all together. It's all about unity, and we got to break this division, and that's what I'm here for. Patrick?
All right. All right, so real quick, we're going to go over a couple slides real quick on how you can actually help us change the laws in the state. Representative Kukarni, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, if you want to add anything, you are welcome to add input into this, okay?
Sure.
All right, so let's go ahead and get this going because I know everyone's got a busy weekend. All right, so before we go any further, I want to thank our sponsors that we have right now. We have KY CBD Pharmacy, Robert. We have Kentucky Medical Marijuana Center, 502 Hemp, Medical Cannabis Clinic of Kentucky, One Love Hemp Dispensary, and Bluegrass Therapeutic Cannabis. These businesses in the state agree on what we're doing here. They've actually reached into their pocket and are actually paying us, helping us get these laws changed in the state. So if you know who these groups are, we want to ask that you reach out to them and say thank you for their support. And we just got One Love Hemp, so a special thing for One Love Hemp. All right, and we have a referral program, right? If you're interested in helping us get sponsors, please go to legalizekentucky.com/referral program. It's real simple to sign up. Okay. Now we want to welcome Representative Kakarni. She is the sponsor of HB 105. Representative Kakarni, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm Nima Kulkarni. I am the state representative for District 40, of which Patrick is one of my constituents, and I'm so grateful for him to invite me on this show and also for being such a strong advocate for cannabis reform in Kentucky.
We appreciate you attending. We appreciate you attending. All right, so let's go through some more slides. We have a 420 event coming up. We are actually got our little 420 buttons that we are asking everyone to purchase. You can actually get these for $5, right, on our website, or you can come visit us at the flea market. We're on 420. We're asking everyone to purchase one of these buttons, take a picture, tag themselves, and such. And Robert, he also has a 420 event. Robert, do you want to plug that real quick?
Absolutely. We're going to be putting on a 420 event that Saturday before 420. We all know 420 falls on Easter this year, so we're trying not to interrupt that. But the Saturday before is going to be great. It'll be on Nicholasville Road in Jessamine County, Kentucky. There are vendors available, vendor spots available. We've got food trucks. We've got Daniel Kane playing. It's going to be a really good event. 420 events generally turn out pretty good there, and everybody's welcome.
Yep. And we appreciate you holding the event. All right, exciting news. We are actually going to be setting up at the Shepherdsville Flea Market for the next 2 months, every Saturday and Sunday. All right, so after this meeting, I'm closing my computer. We're going straight down to Shepherdsville. Come and visit us. We're over by the food court. We're trying to educate people about the bills and what bills to support.
And we have buttons available, no postage.
Yeah, we have buttons available as well. That was my wife, Jennifer. So, all right. So now these are the bills that we want to focus on. Okay. We want to just go over them real quick. HB 34, no. On HB 34, it will make people using full spectrum CBD products driving impaired. Okay. And I will let Robert talk about that one and then HB 62. Go ahead, Robert.
This bill, HB 34, basically says the amount of nanograms that are allowed in your blood. And we've got representatives that are making these bills that don't necessarily understand that or how it processes through human bodies generally. But we have to stop this, because if your granny gets pulled over and she's a full spectrum CBD consumer, I mean, she would be eligible for DUI and everything that goes with it. I've actually seen that happen, and all the things that come from that for law-abiding citizens that get accused incorrectly. It's not okay. We got to prevent that from happening and prevent Kentuckians from having to suffer through that, all of us. HB 62, vapes, it will fix the issues with HB 11 that could cause us to not be able to sell hemp vapes. Keep in mind, HB 11 is the reason all the vapes were taken out of the gas stations and stuff. That was a bill that was basically pushed by Philip Morris. Not basically, it was absolutely pushed by Philip Morris. And it banned several vapes in the state. Well, at the same time, we've just passed a medical marijuana bill, which is the most restrictive bill in the United States. But that bill says very specifically, you cannot smoke the flower product, you have to vape it. So there's contradiction inside the laws, and they're having to clean that up. So we have to be involved in this, because there are laws that are changing, are laws that are getting put up to be even looked at. And I'm hoping some of the advocates are the ones that are looking at it, not just the lobbyists. HB 105 and HB 106. Patrick?
Those are our bills. Those are the ones that we are supporting, right? Those are the ones that Representative Kakarni is responsible for. There is another bill actually in the Senate from Senator Yates, which is almost identical to Representative Kakarni's, right? It's just completely different language, but it does the same thing, right? We are discussing that with Yates as we speak, okay? And now, Kakarni, do you want to reflect on that? Or do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I've spoken to Senator Yates, so we didn't coordinate on sort of companion bills or anything. So I will also be following up with him about exactly what the language is and if we can maybe get some consistency and coordination in the two chambers. It's not unusual for similar bills to be filed in the House and the Senate. It increases the odds, right, of passage and discussion on the legislation. So yeah, I think we're going to be coordinating with him as well.
And that's the only reason we haven't actually pushed his bill or even announced it, because we are trying to actively see if we can actually change it to the same language as yours, Kakarni. That's the goal, because we already have the backing of several organizations behind your language. Why, that our thinking is, why do we need to
Reinvent the wheel.
reinvent the wheel? That's how
Right.
we. So, all right. So we're gonna go over. Keep going. So I'm gonna go over changing the cannabis laws in Kentucky. I'm going to talk about how you can help change the cannabis laws in Kentucky, whether you're passionate about the social, medical, or economic benefits of cannabis legalization. There are several impactful steps that you can take to contribute to these costs. Let's get into it real quick. First, we want you to educate yourself. First and foremost, knowledge is power. Begin by educating yourself about the current cannabis laws in Kentucky. Understand the benefits and risks associated with cannabis use, as well as a broader social and economic impact of legalization. Once you have gathered this information, share it with your friends, family, and community. Building a well informed support base can make significant differences in promoting change. And if I go too fast, please ask me to slow down. Robert, do you want to take this?
Engage in advocacy. That's exactly what we're doing right here, right now. And look, we've got a representative here with us. And thank you very much, Nima. We appreciate you being here. Engaging in advocacy is a crucial step. Join local or national advocacy groups that are dedicated to cannabis law reform. These organizations often provide resources, run campaigns, and host events where you can participate to amplify your voice. By becoming an active member, you can create collective push for change that is far more effective than going it alone. I know that personally. Stand in a group. We're here to give you that group.
Yeah. All right. Number 3, contact your Representative Kakarni. Your voice matters, especially when it's reaching out to your elected officials. Contact your local, state, and federal representatives to express your support for cannabis law reform. Writing letters, making phone calls, or attending town hall meetings are all effective ways to communicate your stance. Sharing personal stories and well-researched arguments can have significant impact on your representative's perspective. Their number is 1-800-372-7181. It literally takes less than 5 minutes to contact them. So, I mean, it's not hard at all. All right,
I have a question for Miss Nima right now.
go for it.
Miss Kulkarni, whenever we're telling people to call Frankfurt for this message line, do you actually get those messages?
We do. So typically what we used to get are something called green slips, which are actually green pieces of paper that would get put on your desk with constituent messages, whether it's an issue or whether it's exactly this type of advocacy where you're saying, please support this legislation, or if it's a bill that you want to oppose, you can say, please oppose it. We can still opt to get pieces of paper. And, the idea is if you have so many advocates calling about a particular issue, you might get a huge pile of green slips from your own constituents on your desk. And so the point of being a legislator is, of course, to represent the district that you serve. And if you've got all of these people in your district talking to you about a bill, especially to support it, then it's your job, right, and your responsibility to listen to them. So it is a very good way to advocate. Now we have, of course, PDF versions of it. I tend to get still actual pieces of paper where I can, so I can go through them all one by one. And so it's just very important for advocates to remember that. We actually do get those messages. We get the green slips. We also get messages that you leave us over the phone. We get emails. So we have our legislative aides that help us parse through some of that. But we absolutely do get all of those messages. And again, the more that we get, the more we have to listen.
So let
And
me
I
ask,
appreciate that.
now let me ask a follow-up question on the status of this bill. How much noise have you heard?
So not too much. You remember, Patrick, I've filed these bills for years now. And usually we'll have something in the beginning of the year with advocates, with media. This was right when we had the big snowstorm. So it was very difficult. Everybody was kind of shut down. So we didn't have that opportunity to get everybody together in Frankfurt in the Rotunda. to be able to sort of voice that same message. But I'm going to be pushing for, obviously, trying to get this heard in committee, right? I am, full disclosure, part of the super minority in Kentucky. I'm one of 20 Democrats in the House out of 100. And so it is important to move the discussion forward, right? Constitutional amendments, it's important to remember, take more than a simple majority. It takes 2/3 of each chamber in order to get that language put on the ballot. And so it is a higher bar because we are, of course, amending the Constitution of Kentucky. That being said, we have done that for other ballot measures before, so it's not like it doesn't happen. But yeah, I think what I'm definitely going to push for is making sure that other legislators know about the issue and what the difference is between cannabis legalization, whether for medicinal, whether for full recreational use, and decriminalization, which is a completely different angle to approaching cannabis reform in Kentucky and throughout the country.
Now, Ms. Kulkarni, I've been in this for many years, and again, you have filed bills annually, and we appreciate you. Part of what I do is I can't stop remembering the past. So I'm just going to think last year, and I remember being in the rotunda, as you just said, and we had 8 national news agencies videoing us, and there was a group of Kentucky colonels that were helping to introduce all of this. Last session is whenever medical marijuana was supported inside our state house. And Governor Beshear opened his support to medical at the exact same time we happened to have this amendment to the Kentucky Constitution. Since then, that obviously took the news, and that's the bill that was passed. Since then, our governor, and you've mentioned that Democrats are the super minority currently, but our governor is a Democrat at the time, and we're looking for Republican support to make this bipartisan. But this comes back down to you're in the minority, and we've got a Democratic governor. So I would expect that you would have an open line of communication to him. Our governor sat on a world stage with Kamala Harris about 6 months ago and spoke about federal cannabis decriminalization, but he still hasn't been able to acknowledge that conversation in his state. Is there any way that we can force that conversation with our governor and pointing out the inconsistencies in this political platform we're all dancing around?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember, again, the political climate, and that people are interested in reelection, fundamentally. So if this is something that is not, for instance, polling well in your district, or even for the governor, if medical is the approach that is polling well, then that's what you're going to go with. I will say the advocates for medical cannabis have been at this issue for years and years and years before they got any traction, right? Any kind of a hearing, any kind of discussion, any kind of buy-in. So this is something that will take time. It will take a lot of advocacy. You would see them all the time, right, in Frankfort, and you would get one legislator after another who they would approach and convince, right, one by one, that this is something that's needed for individuals with chronic conditions, for veterans, for seniors. And that's how we got this medical bill. It is the most restrictive in our country. And, I don't agree with the way it's being rolled out. I think having a lottery for the licenses doesn't make any sense. I don't know of any state that I've looked into where it's done that way. And the reason that doesn't make sense, that particular piece of it, and it's something I've always talked about when we discuss cannabis reform, is that we have to make sure that we have some benefit to Kentucky farmers, to Kentucky businesses, to individuals in Kentucky who want to enter the cannabis industry, because Kentucky is late to the game, right? The majority of states have some version of legalized cannabis use, again, whether it's medical or full recreational. And we do not have the luxury of being sort of first to market on this. There are people and companies that have been in this for decades at this point, not just nationally, but internationally. And so we have to be very careful and mindful of being able to allow Kentuckians to enter this cannabis industry on an equal footing, or at least in some way that allows them to benefit from it instead of out of state or out of country companies essentially taking over the market, which is what we're seeing.
Well, what you just spoke on, I had actually been a large part of that. The medical cannabis part of this is why I stepped into this in the first place. And in all honesty, I just used that as a shield to stand up against it with this plant. And I thought, who can argue this? Turns out every legislator I met can. But I supported the medical program, very specifically HB 136, which Patrick had penning in. I mean, he actually had his words in this bill. It's a very well-written bill. And just as you said, the medical advocates had to go to each representative and ask for their support. Now, in asking for their support, each one of these representatives had something that they didn't like in that bill, and we had to amend that bill down to accommodate this specific representative's wants, needs, or beliefs. After 47 times of amending that bill down, it was basically rendered useless. And I actually pulled my support personally and professionally from my business away from the medical because it's hard to see activists that have stood there for all these years for lack of, no, I ain't even want to say the words, but they're taking what they don't want to take to get something they don't necessarily want. And it's a step forward when it doesn't make sense that we're having to amend these. My personal representative in my district is Representative Kim King. And I had emailed her and spoke very frankly on her. I've met her several times before. We do road shows in the same place and everything. I mean, we've spoke. So I asked if she could support this bill of yours, and her only response is, I don't support marijuana. And I don't want her to change her beliefs, her support systems, or any of that. I want a representative to represent the will of the people. And I speak for thousands of people. And again, I'm board director of every cannabis industry in Kentucky at this point. But we're not getting the support we need from the representatives. Do you know what's holding the representatives back other than it not polling well, possibly, or making their lobbyists upset? I don't really know how to convince other people, because I mean, you've seen the stories, you've seen the people that get the benefits from it. There's studies, there's thousands of studies, and our representatives act like they can't read them, which makes me really question if they're even reading the bills. But how do we reach these representatives? Because we've done everything we can. So at this point, I'm looking for other avenues to reach them to actually get a reaction, because the reaction is what we need now. So
Hey,
Yeah.
Robert,
what's that?
can I add something to that? I called the Daniel Elliott's office, and I was trying to explain to them about the importance of growing our own medicine, about hunting the phenotypes, because each phenotype is different. And literally, the secretary about laughed at me. Say, we just now just started medical cannabis. That's a long ways away. Well, it's important way.
That's what we're here for, is opening up this conversation.
I
right,
just
so-
wanted to add that little part to it.
All right, so let's move forward, okay?
Move forward, Patrick.
All right. So number 4, support cannabis legalization. Stay informed about upcoming bills and initiatives related to cannabis. When election comes, make sure your vote in favor of pro-cannabis measures and encourage others to do the same. Your vote is a powerful tool that can help shape policies and laws in Kentucky. Keep an eye on legislative developments to ensure you're ready to support initiatives that align with your views. Our bill is HB 105. There's the link. You can go view it. All right. Share it with your family and friends, everyone you can, please. Number 5, participating in public demonstration. Finally, show your support by attending rallies, marches, and other public demonstrations that advocate for cannabis legalization. These events not only serve as a show of solidarity, but also help raise public awareness and put pressure on policies makers to consider reform. Join others in public demonstration can amplify your message that cannabis law reform is a priority for Kentuckians. Now, with that said, Representative Kikarnik can speak to this. When we did do our event at the Rotunda, we probably had what, maybe 50 people there. Is that correct, Carney?
I think so. Yeah.
Something like that, something like that. We need the same kind of people, that the number of people that showed up, just like for the teachers did. That makes changes. That's what we were talking about. We need everyone to step up. But you're not breaking the law by voicing your opinion. This is your First Amendment right. I'm asking everybody to practice their First Amendment right
Peacefully.
peacefully. Now, with that, Kakarni, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to add very quickly, you know, when people show up, it's called the People's House, right? It is a place where you know, voters and residents and citizens can show up and make their voices heard outside of voting, outside of the legislative session as well. And the advocates that Patrick talked about and the supporters of this legislation, session after session, are a very diverse bunch, right? You've got people from pretty much every political ideology you can think of that may not agree on anything else, but they do agree on cannabis reform and the approach that these particular pieces of legislation take, which is on decriminalizing and not necessarily on the legalization, the regulation, and the taxation of it, because it's not necessarily all about the money and it's not necessarily all about profit and revenue. What I have focused on is decrim specifically just because of the history, right, of the criminalization of cannabis in this country. And Patrick, I can get into all of that because I think it's important. Going back to Robert's point on why somebody can say, I don't agree, right? I just don't agree with using marijuana. And I think we need to understand why people feel that way and feel so strongly that way. And the education of the history of criminalizing cannabis in this country is very important for people to understand. And I mean, you know, I know, Patrick, you've got some more slides to go through, so I am happy to go through some of that history.
You go ahead,
Some
you
of
go ahead.
some of us on this call probably already know about it. I know, Patrick, you've heard me talk about it multiple
You are
times.
welcome. This is a safe place. I want you to be able to voice whatever you want to
Yeah,
add. Because we
and
only
I
got
think
3 more slides. 3 more slides.
Okay, I'll be very quick. I think I'll go way back, right? So back into like the 1900s, and I'm just going to talk about a few quick milestones that we all need to be aware of. So cannabis was called cannabis, and was not used very widely in the United States at the turn of the centuries, right? So we're talking about around 1900. 1910, you had the Mexican Revolution, and then you had more Mexicans coming into the United States because of xenophobia. We started calling it marijuana so we could tie it to Mexican migrants. And it was the same idea, right? That these folks are degenerates, they're criminals, and associating marijuana use with that particular population led to states beginning to outlaw the use of marijuana. In 1937, we had the Marijuana Stamp Act, I think it was called, and it basically made marijuana illegal, right, federally. And that's how it stayed. And this was despite evidence back then that there was no danger in using cannabis. And so one of the things that my bills do is change, right, the word marijuana back to cannabis because it has pejorative, racist, and xenophobic history and roots. So that's important to understand because from that point on, right? So we're talking about 1937 all the way up until 1969, when that particular act was deemed unconstitutional. It was replaced by the Controlled Substances Act, which has scheduled cannabis as a Schedule I drug along with heroin and LSD. And this is during the Nixon administration. And we have heard from Nixon himself and from John Erlanger that they knew that cannabis was not dangerous. They knew that it did not warrant the penalties that they were asking for during the war on drugs, which was, of course, announced in 1971. But they needed it as a tool, just like they did in the 1930s against Mexican migrants. They needed it to be able to associate, right, anti-American values with the anti-war left, so the protesters that were against the Vietnam War, and with Black activists like the Black Panthers. So you say that, you know, those types of people use marijuana, they're bad, they're un-American, they're bad for society. You criminalize those things heavily. And that's how you get the antipathy to those particular groups that this administration needed. Now, 2024, that's what it's been, right? That's what the law is. That's what it is on the books right now. The majority of our states have some version of cannabis use. And at this point, it is outdated, it is antiquated. We still have not rescheduled cannabis, but the history of that is why it's so easy for somebody to say, it's not good. I don't agree with marijuana. I don't think people should use it. This idea of it being a gateway drug, all of that is pervasive because it's been the history, right? Alongside with our immigration laws, alongside all of the terrible history that we've had and the dark chapters we've had around xenophobia and racism in this country. And it's important to remember that when we want change, why it's so difficult, why these ideas are so entrenched in people's minds. And education, I think, is critical if you want people to understand why you want to change. And so leaving it to the people by amending our constitution or putting it on the ballot takes that sort of decision making away from legislators who may not want to say, I am okay with legalizing cannabis use. They can say, I'm leaving it to the people, right? I'm leaving it to the constituents in my district to vote how they want this to look in Kentucky. And I will abide by that because that is what the people want. And so it is crucial for us to look at the inequity, right? And the history of cannabis criminalization if we're going to move forward. And so these bills, their constitutional amendment, leave it to the people. And then the other bill, which delves a little bit deeper into the details, has a significant expungement provisions, right? Not just for drug offenses, but for drug paraphernalia offenses, which is tens of thousands, where there's no drugs that were present, but paraphernalia was present. And so people have been living with this and these records in their background and are unable, right, to move forward in this new industry that we're going to be establishing in Kentucky. We are not starting off on the same footing. So any legalization measure that we enact in Kentucky needs to have strong and rational decriminalization policies attached to it, or people will continue to keep getting left behind.
Absolutely. I want to bring a little bit to your fight for this. Again, I'm a board director for the Kentucky Hemp Association as well, and I own Kentucky CBD Pharmacy. So the hemp industry over the last 5 to 7 years has definitely progressed. And through legal battles and decisions in court, we've been able to basically decriminalize cannabis nationally with the hemp program. So currently, and in my stores, we have a level of progression, which our products range from CBD only to straight Delta-9 THC, which is the exact same THC as in medical cannabis. How are we not able to put this into the news cycles to let people know that this is here, this won't cause that detriment to society that everybody's afraid of, rather than causing addiction, which they say it will? We've actually dropped addiction rates in the state of Kentucky for 4 years solid, and that is a direct result of that. How can we get this knowledge to transfer over to the cannabis space, as in, hey, we already have this here. This is a product in Kentucky that's legal currently. It's molecularly and identical to the medical program that we're trying to force right now. How can we make those correlate to help each other, especially in the news cycle? Because most of the advocates don't understand or simply refuse to understand that Delta-9 THC from hemp is the exact same Delta-9 THC from medical marijuana, because when it comes down to it, cannabis is what we're talking about, and it's a tax difference on both sides of that. So how do we actually use the Delta-9 THC products we have currently right now in the state of Kentucky to justify full decriminalization? Because I've got, not my clients, but I've seen clients of mine that have gotten products at other places that's been sentenced with DUIs. They've been arrested. And we have to stop this. And I mean, this comes back down to it. And I would love to be able to show you what I'm talking about, this level of escalation. Because if our legislators knew this was already here and has been for years and years, it might take a little wind out of their sails for that fighting against it.
Yeah, and I mean, all we can do, right, in the sense of change, it's people power. I believe very strongly in people power. This is not going to come down from the top. This is not going to be something that's just going to happen because everybody starts agreeing with you one day. It's going to take a lot of advocacy, a lot of education, and that's what, you know, grassroots activism is. And I think that's what we need. You just need more people advocating for the same very understandable things. So don't get into all the weeds of the, you know, make it easy to understand for people, right? Who have already and assume they already have preset notions about cannabis. They think what they think, they've learned what they've learned, and you have to convince them of something else and to look at it in a little bit different light. And especially to your point, from the lens of who it's impacting, right? How is it benefiting people? Why is that important? Versus the sort of detrimental things they may have heard about cannabis use. But it's going to take the same kinds of efforts that you all are talking about and have been doing, right, to get to the medical cannabis program that we have, that was passed as a piece of legislation. So it's going to take that level and a lot of time, to get to decriminalization, even if it's something that doesn't pass on its own, if it's included, right? Even if these provisions are included in a larger legalization bill, or law, we have to keep fighting, for the same issues because we just can't keep leaving people behind. And to your point, like amending and carving out and exempting to where it's not having the impact that you initially wanted it to have.
Well, what I would add, if I may add to that, Carney, right? Since December, I'm just to let you know, since December, our group has grown by 6,000 people. Dramatically. We now have 38,000 Kentuckians that support this initiative, and we are actively getting them engaged. 10,000 of them are actively engaged in our group. So we're making that progress. We're moving that forward. We're at one step at a time. I understand exactly what you're talking about. Consistency is the key. Persistency is the key. Education is the key. Right? Stay on the same. Stay on point. That's basically what we're talking about, right? We want this to be decriminalized for all Kentuckians, right? Because personally, I think that all cannabis use can be considered medicinal. That's just my personal opinion. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and finish this up. We've got about 10 minutes. All right. Can we move forward? All right. Robert, you want to take this one? This is Robert's baby, Carney.
Absolutely. Contacting your media, and Ms. Kulkarni will have plenty of help with this too. An important step in raising awareness about cannabis law reform is to connect with your media. Reach out to newspapers, radio stations, television channels to share information about this bill and its significance. Ask them to report on the current state of cannabis laws in Kentucky and the potential benefits of reform. By getting media coverage, you can help inform a wider audience and generate public interest, which can put additional pressure on lawmakers to take action. Engaging the media can amplify your message and increase the chances of positive change. That's super important. There is a complete media blackout on this bill. We have heard very little about it in our media. So I've actually been reaching out to national organizations and national news stations to cover our Kentucky cannabis corruption, because we have to be able to get people to know this, even if we're reaching outside of our own state to get our state to know this. If our media isn't going to put these bills in the media, we've got to find a way to get it there. So contacting media is super important. Ms. Kulkarni, if you have any suggestions on getting this into the media, please let them fly. I will take them. And if you ever need to get anything going with the media, we're always happy to support you as well.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, of course, we didn't have time when we began session. We're going back into session next week. It is a short session. But there's nothing that is precluding us from having an event like we usually did in January each time I filed this legislation. And so that will, of course, go out to media, and maybe we can talk offline about organizing something like that as well, just because we've done it, right, for the past several years and we're stopped by the weather, but we have time. I know that there has been interest because there is perennial interest in this issue, right? So it's not, I don't think that there's anything intentional. We just have to let them know. And so, certainly all these events that you talked about earlier, all of the ways that you can get involved outside of events, but we can definitely plan something that media can focus on so that word is sent out to them all at once, right? And they don't have to chase it down.
All right. All right. So, in conclusion, by taking these steps, you contribute to ongoing efforts to change cannabis laws and help create a more informed, equality society. For more information, you can visit legalizekentucky.com. Together, we can make a difference. We thank you for your attention. All right. So, with that said, we're going to go ahead and open this up. We have 5 minutes. Okay. I'm going to see. Anybody got any questions in the chat for Carney? By chance? Let me see if I can pull the chat up.
Johnny, I got a question. Do you see us being able to grow our own medicine in the near future, in the next probably like 3 to 4 years?
No.
So that is a provision in both of my bills. It is not, I don't think, something that is envisioned in the medical cannabis legislation or the implementation of what has passed. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with kind of being able to control the distribution of it. And so when I was talking earlier about being able to benefit Kentuckians and Kentucky businesses and Kentucky farmers, it's very important that we put some guardrails in place where it's not just out of state, right, out of country companies that are kind of going to be the
Like Dark
beneficiaries
Horse
of it.
and Arizona Bay Investments.
Sorry, say that again.
Like Dark Horse and Arizona Bay Investments. All
Yeah,
these
and I
out
mean,
of state investments.
there's nothing wrong, right? So other states that have done this have partnered. For instance, if you have a company that has the knowledge and sort of the infrastructure, you can partner with these organizations and these companies. But the issue is that the way that we have opened it up, it was a lottery system. So it didn't, it had no rhyme or reason to it. And I've never heard of that happening, even in states that were early to try and decriminalize or legalize cannabis. And so being this late to the game, I don't know that that is the smartest thing for us to do, but we've got to advocate for that as well, right? This is not a top-down approach. We're going to have to advocate to let people know that we have to prioritize Kentuckians.
All right. And what
Go ahead.
what I would say to that, just to add, to bring, we got to bring people into this movement, as many people as we can, to be active about this. Right. So, not to get off subject about the meeting, but we need to kind of stay on focus. We're holding these meetings, Kakarni, we're holding these meetings twice a week, all the way through the end of session. Literally Sunday morning and Wednesday night. All right, all the way through the end of session. So we are inviting all Kentucky legislators to join this meeting. News reporters, we've reached out to all news reporters, right, to get them involved, because we understand that everyone counts in this particular movement, right? We're not perfect by any means, but we are here for the state of Kentucky to get these laws changed, period. Robert, we got about 3 more minutes. Did you want to add anything else, or Kakarni?
I don't have anything to add. I want to thank you all for your time and for inviting me and supporting this legislation. Again, I think we have some time to get this conversation moving forward, and of course, keep on advocating for cannabis decriminalization in Kentucky.
Ms.
Robert,
Kincaid, before you leave, could I speak with you? I know we've said a lot, but the fact that I am a resident of Kentucky, a citizen, however you put it, I've been injured. I've sustained substantial injuries, been put on large amounts of opiates, I've gotten myself off of them through the help of my family and cannabis. But there is a huge stigma around it, even with me dealing with my doctors that I did deal with, and how they're impacted. What can we do about the image that is surrounded the stigma of cannabis? I mean, is that something we need to stand up and have, just like everybody said, the teachers and meet in the rotunda so that you can see physically who it is impacting?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would, yes.
Yeah, and I think this is a coalition building scenario, right? So you don't want the same people. You want to have people from different, again, political ideologies, different industries. So you might want to have a coalition built of healthcare professionals who understand the benefits and the lack of danger or whatever the issues are that could approach it from a medical standpoint. This is going back to education, and it's going back to getting more people enlisted, right? Who are able to speak to the benefits, just like Chris, you did, on how it has helped you in your own life, how it has helped you not use opiates anymore. And so it is something that is going to take individual stories. It's going to take individuals who are building coalitions with different industries, different organizations. That is the way you amplify the message. That's the way you amplify your voice, because it's impacting so many different people, right? So you need to make sure that they are all represented in your coalition, and make that coalition large enough to where people have to pay attention.
Very well said. Very well said. All right. Well, with that said, it is now 11 o'clock. We have reached our hour. Representative Kulkarni, again, I appreciate you attending. I appreciate everything that you do for us up in Frankfurt. I look forward to having a committee hearing as soon as possible, preferably in the Judiciary Committee, right? That's where I'd like to see it happen. But, I was always told bills go there to die, but this bill is where it needs to be. So, with that said, you have a wonderful weekend. And if you're in Shepherdsville, come and see us at the flea market. We'll see
Thank
y'all
you.
later. See you.
Bye.